Good morning from El Paso, Texas, where the temperature today is expected to get to a high of 98 degrees before we go through another stretch where the temperature is expected to break triple digits. And welcome to another episode of the Randall Cadenhead Report. A lot of news to get into today, so let's get going. President Trump, with his usual use of hyperbole, is warning of an economic D-Day against Iran as we inch closer to the 6 month mark of the war. However, Iran has already endured nearly 5 decades of punishing U.S. sanctions, so what's more sanctions? Trump didn't give a whole lot of detail when he announced earlier this week that the United States would be imposing upon the Islamic Republic of Iran an unprecedented level of economic warfare and isolation. The purpose for these new sanctions, the AP is reporting, is to force Iran's leadership to give into American demands that they end the country's nuclear program and to fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz to oil and natural gas tankers. It's the latest effort by the administration to find a way out of the nearly 6 month long war that has resulted in the deaths of 18 American soldiers, around 780 Americans wounded, and the death of thousands of Iranian civilians and military. The war, unpopular in the United States, according to the RCP average, only 34.6% of Americans approve of Trump's handling of Iran, has tanked global oil markets, while also dragging President Trump's job approval rating into the gutter. According to the RCP average, Trump's job approval rating is at 39.5%, and even Trump's favorite polling organization, Rasmussen Reports, has Trump at 42% in terms of job approval, with a 56% disapproval. According to the RCP average, Trump's disapproval is at 57.22%. The USS George Washington has arrived in the Middle East, relieving the USS Abraham Lincoln, which is now headed home to the United States. The Lincoln has come under intense scrutiny for adverse conditions and low morale. The deployment of the George Washington to the Middle East, which was forward deployed to the Pacific, now leaves the South Pacific without an American aircraft carrier at a time when China is becoming more aggressive and is building up its military. Four United Methodists were among an interfaith delegation of U.S. citizens that was attempting to cross the border into Israel to visit with Christians into the Holy Land, returned back. According to United Methodist News, the, the delegation, led by Reverend Edward Phillips, a retired United Methodist professor, consisted of 13 members, including Phillips. Phillips told United Methodist News that he has been to the Holy Land 4 times in order to visit sacred sites and to spend time with Christian believers and others who call Palestine and Israel their home. However, Phillips and the group were turned back at the Israeli-Jordanian border by Israeli border police when they attempted to enter Israel on their latest visit on August 13th. Phillips, in a phone call from Jordan, told United Methodist News that, quote, "We were tourists going there to visit holy places, talk with Christians and others about their lives, especially on the West Bank. We wanted to hear their stories and support the Palestinian economy," unquote. Phillips said that although some members of the group were able to cross without any problems, others were questioned very strongly by Israeli immigration officials, who Phillips said accused them of supporting terrorism in Israel. Phillips said, quote, "One woman who interviewed me accused me of lying and told me, 'You're coming here to tell people what we're doing to the Christians. That's what you're here to do. Shame on you,' unquote." Trump, Trump this morning on Truth Social announced the administration's plan that is aimed at reducing beef prices for consumers by allowing more beef to be imported into the United States without higher tariffs. Trump said that the agreement would permit up to 300,000 metric tons of ground beef to be brought into the United States for the next 90 days without triggering an out of quota tariff. Trump also said that he had a commitment to that the beef would be sold at 25% below current market rates, making beef cheaper for consumers in the United States. Trump didn't say which country or countries that the deal was with, or who the beef would be imported from. As a conciliatory gesture to North Korea, the United States and South Korean militaries have ended their annual military drill 6 days then 6 days earlier than originally scheduled. Trump last week ordered the Pentagon to, to substantially reduce the exercise, which began this past Monday. Trump cited as the reason for his decision what he described as his what he described as his good relationship with North Korea's communist dictator Kim Jong-un, along with South Korea's refusal to support Trump's war in Iran. Yesterday, on its following through on its threat to respond to the annual military exercise, which it sees as a reversal for an invasion. Rehe- as a rehearsal for an invasion. North Korea fired towards the sea around 10 short-range ballistic missiles. In midterm election news, Trump is planning to campaign for Senator Darlene Graham, the sister of the late Senator Lindsey Graham, ahead of the South Carolina GOP Senate runoff, which is now days away. Graham, like Trump, is casting herself as a political outsider and has stated her support for Trump administration policies and touts his endorsement of her senatorial campaign. Graham, who states her 2 years as head of a state independent living agency, along with her several weeks in the Senate, as evidence for her readiness, says that she's answering President Trump's call to serve and has repeatedly said that she wants to fight for President Trump's agenda, citing Trump's policy goals of border security and passing the Save America Act. Now for this day in history. On this day in 1858, Senator Stephen Douglas of Illinois and Illinois lawyer Abraham Lincoln, a one-term congressman, met for the first of what would be a series of political debates, known to history as the Lincoln-Douglas debates. The famous state debates centered around the topic of slavery and its expansion into the Western territories. Douglas, a Democrat, argued in support of popular sovereignty, meaning that he believed that the issue of whether a territory would be slave or free should be determined by the residents of the territory. Lincoln, the Republican who was challenging Douglas for the Senate seat, was opposed to the expansion of slavery into the Western territories. Lincoln lost his bid for the Senate. However, the debates, which became national news, gave himself and the young Republican Party a national profile and national notoriety, which Lincoln would use in his campaign for the presidency 2 years later, winning the White House and becoming America's first Republican president. Hope that everyone has a great Friday and weekend. Stay safe and talk to you all again on Monday.